Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started here. Welcome everyone to the first ACE webinar. Our plan is to briefly talk about our strategy and some upcoming research plans, which will go on for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then open up the floor for questions for about 20 to 30 minutes as well. We're hoping this will make our thought process more transparent to all of you here today, and we're also recording this, so we plan on making it available afterward as well. Additionally, we think we have a particularly intelligent following, and we hope to learn some from you today as well, and perhaps use some of your perspectives and ideas to improve ACE's work. So with that in mind, let's get started. First off, let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Jon Bockman, and I'm the Executive Director of Animal Charity Evaluators, and I joined the organization in April of 2013. If you have any questions about what's said here today, you can contact me at the email provided below my picture, and I'll show that again at the end of the presentation. Without further ado, let's talk about ACE's mission and strategy. ACE's mission is to find and promote highly effective ways to improve the lives of animals. We do this through researching which charities operate most effectively according to our criteria, and through providing advice to volunteers, donors, and professionals. More specifically, we have four main goals. Our first goal is to provide the best available advice to donors, charities, and animal advocates on how to be effective. This means that we evaluate and research organizations as well as techniques that help animals. Unfortunately, there's very little research on these areas right now. An important question we're asking ourselves is whether or not it's best for us to invest our limited resources in our own studies, or whether we should be prioritizing convincing academics to do relevant research for us. Currently, we're exploring both, but I'll let Allison talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Our second goal is to move at least 10 times our annual budget to our top recommended charities. This is a long-term goal, and this is something we're obviously not going to be able to do in our early stages. For this first year, we set targets that just about equal our annual budget. We're still not even sure if we will achieve that, as there are a lot of factors at play that affect our totals in this area. For example, we're still young, we're relatively unknown, and we're still establishing trust and credibility with the public. Those qualities are essential for many bigger donors to adhere to our findings, so we don't expect to be moving as much money early on. Also, our evidence isn't as rigorous this round as we would like, because we only had time to do a round of medium reviews for both our May and December recommendations this year. We took this approach because we didn't want to wait any longer to update our recommendations and support them with sound evidence. Moving forward in 2015, we plan on having an entire year to research organizations and techniques, and thus to produce even higher quality reviews. So, in conjunction with building up our reputation, eventually we'd like to be moving 10 times our annual budget to our top charities. Our third goal is to create an environment where organizations strive to find and use the most effective ways to help animals. This is part of our motivation behind not ranking charities with a 2 or 3 or 4-star ranking or anything like that, because we think that we would be burning our bridges, so to speak, with organizations that scored particularly low. Instead, we want to establish an environment of cooperation and mutually shared goals of helping as many animals as possible. And we want those organizations that might not get our recommendations to ask us why they didn't make the cut, and ask us what could they be doing to do better in the future. An example of a project that we've done in this area this year is the Survey Guidelines Project, which we created in collaboration with the Humane Research Council. Through this project, we provide advocates and organizations with very important information about how to successfully conduct surveys when evaluating the effectiveness of their work. Right now, the few results that we do have from research often use different types of scales to quantify behavior change, and those different scales are unfortunately rarely comparable across multiple studies. We're hoping to foster more cooperation with projects like this and to get organizations to be as effective as possible with their work. Finally, we want to spread a meme of greater concern for animals. We hope to be doing that through all of the work that we're doing in the previous 3 goals, But more broadly, we want people to care about all animals and to think about them as having their own lives and interests and things of that nature. It's worth pointing out here that we're aware of areas like wild animal suffering, in which incredibly vast numbers of animals are suffering every day in nature. We want to help those animals as well if we can, but we feel that society is more likely to embrace more esoteric animal advocacy areas like wild animal suffering if they start thinking differently about animals in general, and that farm animal advocacy is the best method to spark that change in thinking. This is why we're currently promoting farm animal advocacy groups. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we try to maximize our impact. I'm going to briefly cover a few things that we're actively doing to do this, and then discuss some questions we're asking ourselves internally right now. First, we're focusing on farm animals. I touched on this in the previous point about spreading memes, but here I'll just mention the numbers. If you look at all land animals that are killed by humans in the United States, 99 out of 100 are farm animals. Taking a look at this more detailed version of the chart, we see that the extremity of the problem extends even further. Not only do farm animals make up 99% of land animals killed in the United States, charities that directly work on farm animal issues receive less than 1% of total funding that is given to animal charities. These are very conflicting values, and they show that there are great gains to be had directing more money to farm animal advocacy. Apart from directing money to farm animal charities, we appreciate the value of advocates, and maximizing impact includes propagating activists and giving them the tools they need to be successful. To that end, we have some resources on our site that discuss career and volunteer advice. But in broad terms, it's very important to consider creating more activists. To explain this point a little bit more, if one person becomes an animal advocate and stops eating animals, they can still only spare a finite amount of animals. No matter how pure they are with their diet and how carefully they avoid animal products, they still have a cap on the number of animals that they can help by their own individual choices. However, if one person dedicates themselves to creating other activists, then the numbers start adding up, and then we're talking about a real change for animals. So now that we know a little bit more about the areas that ACE sees as particularly important, how do we measure our own impact? We've recently taken the first steps to analyzing the impact of our own work through tracking the amount of money moved to our top charities. To do this, we're using a variety of means, and we're looking at the potential of us taking in money on behalf of our top charities in the future so we can even more accurately track our impact. Part of maximizing our impact is asking ourselves tough questions about what we're doing and if we can't be doing better. We're currently looking at a few of these questions right now. For example, should we just focus on promoting farm animal advocacy in general? The thinking behind this idea is that it's possible we'll have more of an impact just by trying to convince animal advocates to focus on industrial agriculture over areas like shelters. However, we need to ask ourselves key questions about this area. In our recommendations, are we just mainly moving money from less effective farm animal groups to more effective farm animal groups? And if so, that gain is likely to not be as great as just moving more money to farm animal advocacy in general. There's not an easy answer for this, but this is something that we're exploring and that we're asking ourselves. A second point that we're looking at right now is if we should keep our top charity recommendations but create a different category for top tier groups or something along those lines to replace our current standout category. The idea here would be that we're giving credit to the organizations that are doing solid work while still acknowledging our top picks. There are some interlinked pros and cons with this consideration. This might result in more money being transferred to farm animal advocacy in general, but it also might result in less money being directed to our top charities. It might improve our relations with higher quality farm animal charities who didn't previously get selected for recognition, but it also might further alienate us from those who don't get selected, because not only are groups that are not selected not one of our top 4, but if we added a larger category, then they wouldn't be part of our top 10 or 14 or whatever we ended up listing in this top tier group. So there's a lot of things to think about in moving in that direction. One third consideration that we're thinking about right now is if we should be concentrating on producing higher quality reviews, and if we should possibly limit our market like we did in the recent revision to organizations in the US, or if we should focus on evaluating as many charities as possible. It seems like most people, when this topic is brought up, want a higher quantity of brief reviews, but it may be that the most influential actors in this area are those who care about the higher levels of detail. Another pro of being more detailed is greater confidence in our decisions and findings, which of course is a desirable outcome as well. I should note on this front that we are leaning towards using more detailed formats in the future, including using a more extensive footnote system similar to what GiveWell uses. In fact, we've recently done this with one of our top charities, Mercy for Animals, and intend on doing the same with the Humane League Review. A real tough consideration on this point is that it really does take a lot of extra time to do these footnote systems, and it limits what else we can do. We're hoping that we'll be in a better financial position to hire another researcher at some point in the near future to lessen the burden in this area. So these are some of the things that we're looking at right now. We appreciate your thoughts when we get to the discussion period, and I welcome comments at any time via the email you see at the bottom of your screen. At this point, I'd like to introduce ACE's research manager, Allison Smith, who's going to talk about some of our current thinking on research. Allison?
Hi, I'm Allison Smith. I'm the research manager at Animal Charity Evaluators, and you can see my email address at the bottom of this slide if you want to get in contact with me about anything after this presentation. Please feel free to send me an email. So I'm going to talk about our research today. I'm going to focus on identifying the main areas of research that we do and telling you how much time we spend on them, who works on them, and roughly what we're doing and why. So our main area of research is producing charity recommendations. That's both the most visible thing that we do for other people and the thing that we spend most of our research time on. I am taking the lead in that area. I'm assisted by Jon and sometimes by interns and volunteers during the processes where we try to gather information from the internet. What we do here is we try to create a large list of animal charities. Then we narrow it down. We produce shallow reviews for the ones we think we might be interested in recommending. We then produce medium-depth reviews for the top candidates among those. And in theory, in future, we might produce a further, deeper level of review for our very most strongly considered charities, so that we have further information about our top recommended charities. We are right now on a yearly update schedule where we update our recommendations every December 1st. Our previous update was in May because we didn't want to wait all the way until December to update to a more research recommendation. This December, we're going to be adding some groups that do not work in the U.S. And are based overseas, or in Canada or Mexico. In December 2015, we might have other updates, including just more charities with medium-depth reviews. This is the deepest level of review that we have right now. We might have a significantly larger number of charities with that level of review, or we might have deep reviews for some of our top charities and standout charities type levels. The next place where I spend my time is on evaluating interventions. So that's taking and synthesizing all the information that's out there about a particular activity like leafleting or corporate outreach and making that into a recommendation that we can give to charities and that we can feed into our charity recommendation process, and that we can recommend to volunteers whether or not this is something that is suitable for an individual to get involved in and what kind of commitment it will be. This is my secondary focus. It gets fit in around the charity recommendation schedule. So you'll see sort of more intermittent progress from us on that. Right now, what we have in progress is a general template for a very detailed kind of intervention evaluation that we can use on any intervention, and a corporate outreach evaluation using that template. Those are being held back currently by applying the footnote system to parts of the corporate outreach evaluation. but we hope they'll be up very soon. The next thing that we do is we work with outside researchers to create a more rigorous body of research in general about vegetarian outreach and other tactics that animal advocates use for farm animal charities and, in theory, other animal charities as well. This gets coordinated by me and by Jon, but most of the work is actually done by academic researchers who we've been put in touch with by other members of the animal advocacy community or other members of the effective altruism community. And if you know anybody that you think we should be talking to, please feel free and put us in touch. The things we've got going on right there are right now there's a project with a group of economists who are looking at different study designs that they could work on, possibly in conjunction with some kind of public health group. We've got a planned academic write-up of previous studies that we and others have done on things like leafleting and online ads that would have academic ecologists giving advice on how to better study vegetarian outreach in the future. And we're open to further partnerships. And finally, we have individual, sort of more esoteric projects that we're working on at any given time at ACE. I coordinate this work. Most of the actual work is done by our excellent interns or volunteers. We've got a lot of people excited about working with us on these projects, and that's really great. So the projects that we have going on right now are the Social Movements Research Project, which always generates a lot of interest. This summer we've had an intern working on writing the first several case studies of different social movements. Once we have enough case studies, we'll go back and look through those case studies to see what lessons we can take from them in terms of what things we think might lead to success or failure and what tactics we think that animal advocates can best apply to make a difference in our movement. We also have some volunteers working on writing up a review of information about animal sentience, especially as it applies to farm animals, so that we can see which farm animals have how much information for what they can feel and experience, so that we can base that aspect of our reviews a little more rigorously. We are in the pilot phase of a study of pay-per-view video. So pay-per-view video, in case you don't know, is when advocates will go out and they will pay passersby $1 to watch a short video about factory farming. We showed 50 people a short video about factory farming and 50 people a short video about puppy mills. And we're now sending out emails to them to get responses to a survey so we know the response rate and how expensive this would be to try to get statistically significant information about the difference made by showing them the real video as opposed to showing them some other video. And finally, we are in contact with people who are working on a study of online ads promoting vegetarianism through a similar video. That study's been ongoing for a while, and we're just sort of following the research and helping when we can. So those are the 4 areas in which we do research, pretty much in order of the amount of time we as staff spend on them. And that's, any questions? We're about to open the floor.
Great. Thank you for that, Allison. So at this point, we're going to change the format from listen only to question and answer. You're going to hear a quick announcement from the announcer. This is something we couldn't get rid of, so...
Oh,
sure.
muted. The line is now unmuted.
All right, thanks for that, Allison. So at this point, we're going to change from listen only mode to question and answer mode. Once we do this, you're going to hear a small announcement from the announcer. That's not something we can change, so let's go ahead and do that now.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So this means if you're on the phone, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. If you're on the computer, you can unmute yourself by clicking the microphone icon on the top of your screen. At this point, you'll have an opportunity to ask us some questions. Please, we don't have a standard line where people can get up and ask questions in order, so I just ask, please mute yourself if you're not speaking, and please be respectful of others, and let's go ahead and get started. If anyone has a question, I do want to point out you do need to unmute yourself. So that can be done either through clicking the mic icon on the top of the screen or through clicking the microphone on the left side of your screen next to your name. It looks like we have a written question in the side here. How do you quantify or evaluate leafleting, and based on what data? This is more research-related questions, so Allison, would you like to talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. Ideally, we would evaluate leafleting based on two things, I think. One is the amount that people change their diet upon receiving a leaflet, the percentage of people who, upon receiving a leaflet, do change their diet, and the amount they change their diet by. And the other is whether people who receive a leaflet then become involved in animal activism themselves, because as Jon said, one of the really big things is that the difference you can make by changing your own habits is limited, but the difference you can make by encouraging others to change their habits is not limited. So we'd like to evaluate it in both those ways. So far, there are several studies trying to establish the rate at which people who receive leaflets go on to change their diet, how they change their diet. And through those, we don't have a good sense for how well anything creates animal advocates, because actually most things create even people who change their diet at a pretty small rate, and animal advocates at an even smaller rate. So it's just very difficult to establish with any level of rigor. So we do some thinking about that, but we tend to not have specific evidence. In terms of what specific evidence we're using for leafleting, we ran a leafleting study ourselves with a control group, which is one of the pieces of evidence we use. There's also a couple of studies from the Humane League labs.
Great, thank you for that, Allison. I just want to point out really quick that I have heard from someone that the audio may have broken up occasionally during the presentation. So just a quick reminder that we will have this information online at some point in the next few weeks. So you'll be able to hear the full presentation at a later date.
It looks like Jay has a question, maybe? I think I'm going to unmute you for a moment, Jay, and then you can ask a question if you have one. Jay?
Jay, we see your picture, but we don't hear your audio.
No. Why don't you type your question in the chat window, Jay? Jon, I think you should take this one.
Here we go. Where do you see ACE in 5 or 10 years? That's a great question. I see us doing a lot more high quality, a lot higher quality of reviews than we are right now. I think we're going to know a lot more information about what's effective and on different interventions based on some of the internal research that's going on in some of the charities that we evaluate and through programs like the Humane League Labs. I think we're going to have a lot better idea of what's doing the best good for the greatest number of animals. So in the future, I see us producing a lot higher quality reviews. Ideally, 5 years down the road, I would love it if we were working with organizations on a more case-by-case basis to potentially help them improve the quality of their work. This doesn't mean like a huge time investment on our part, but I see us at some point becoming potentially consultants, more or less, for organizations that want to do the best good for animals. I think we'll still be prioritizing what we currently are prioritizing, but I just think we're going to be doing it on a higher quality, a more intensive scale, and I also think that we're going to be kind of expanding our abilities, depending on our, of course, resources, to include other ways to benefit the movement as a whole as much as possible. So I would say that's kind of a brief glance. We do have more detailed 3- and 5-year plans in development, but that's something we're discussing internally. But Jay, I should mention, it was a fantastic intern for ACE over the past couple months, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on some of that as well at some point. Catherine Asher has asked in the sidebar here that I'm a big fan of ACE, but I've heard from others who feel that evaluating effectiveness is too complex to allow for top charity recommendations. How should one answer these criticisms? Well, at this point, I feel that even though our information isn't as rigorous as we would like, we still have enough information to have a good idea on who's doing high quality work. I feel confident in the recommendations that we've made of Mercy for Animals and the Humane League among the organizations that we've looked at this year. There are a lot of considerations, as you could see through looking through our criteria, in what makes an organization effective. It's not solely focused on the cost effectiveness of an intervention or something like that. That's a factor, and that's absolutely something that we're considering to the best of our ability, but there are so many other areas that you need to consider in what makes a charity effective. And I think that we would be doing ourselves and the movement a disservice if we just said to ourselves, the evidence isn't good enough, so we're not going to make any recommendations. I think that we're then going to be missing out on a large period of time where we could have recommended quality organizations and could have moved more money to organizations, even if a person might suggest that our top picks aren't necessarily the top picks, surely they could agree that they're very strong picks. And we would be missing out on an opportunity to move money to more effective organizations. So I think that this concern of being 100%, not necessarily 100%, but of needing a threshold of information and evidence to be able to make recommendations, I think that we are there. I think we're at a point where we can make reasonable recommendations, which is why we've done what we do. So at this point, I think there's value to doing that. Allison, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think your point that these may not be the absolute most effective charities is a really important one, because it's true that these may not be the absolute most effective charities, and especially for people who are in a slightly different philosophical situation from ours, you might find another charity that you think better fits your own understanding of who's going to make the best difference. But we try to provide a lot of information so that people can read our reviews and not just take us at our word that these are really great charities, but see why we think they're really great, and also have the tools to, say, oh, actually, I think in my situation it makes more sense to donate to this other charity, and we provided them with information as well. But really, a large number of people just want someone to find a reliably good, a reliably excellent charity, and I think we're able to identify that.
Definitely agree. We apologize. Apparently the mic system must not be working, because it looks like most of you are typing your questions in the sides. So we'll do the best we can, but we're sorry we're not able to allow you to follow up. On the left, the next question is from Dorina. She writes, your currently recommended charities are MFA and THL. In a nutshell, what makes these two organizations stand out from the other 100 organizations you reviewed? Well, I should point out that we didn't review 100 different organizations, but we did consider them. So we did write up reviews on the ones that were inclined towards farm animals. But regarding Mercy for Animals and the Humane League, we thought both of them were exceptionally strong organizations, because they do a variety of things that make them of high value. First of all, they're engaging in a variety of different types of outreach methods, and they're doing them extremely well and cost effectively. Now, we may not know which intervention is the absolute best one in terms of cost effectiveness, but we do have a reasonable idea of which interventions are doing good things for animals, and we want to kind of hedge our bets by picking organizations that are engaging in a variety of these. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to just pick an organization that just does one thing when we're not entirely certain that one thing is the best thing to do. So we were really impressed with the quality and variety of interventions that both those organizations do on behalf of animals. One particular thing of note I would say about Mercy for Animals is that they allocate a lot of their budget towards undercover investigations. And we think that undercover investigations have a wide array of benefits, well beyond just documenting the video and getting it on the local news, or national news, although that is one of the benefits. I mean, this is a resource for all organizations. When Mercy for Animals is doing their undercover investigations every year, they're getting lots of footage and video and photo that they share willingly with other organizations to allow them to effectively advocate for animals. So something that they're doing is transferable to a lot of organizations and is making a lot of organizations better. So we really liked that. And with the Humane League, we in addition to liking the diversity of their outreach and the quality of their outreach, we really like that they've created a program called the Humane League Labs. This is something that's very, very new to the concept of animal. It's a new concept to animal advocacy in general, in that they're trying to measure the effectiveness of different types of variables in outreach materials and things of that nature. And we think, again, this is something that provides great value to a large number of organizations, not just the Humane League. So we really we really appreciated that they're taking efforts like that. Allison, do you want to talk a little bit about this at all, or do you have anything to add?
I think you pretty much hit everything.
Great. Great. Please do feel free. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that please do feel free, if you have a follow-up question, to type that in the box, and we'll try to keep an eye out for that. So if we're still on the current question, we can continue the discussion, so there's not a breakup of that. So we're gonna try to do that. And Che Green has chimed in with respect to the Humane League Labs is not a new concept. And I do want to say that it is great that the Humane Research Council exists and does really great research on behalf of animals. But I feel like Humane League Labs is kind of looking at things that often weren't looked at by other organizations, although I definitely acknowledge that HRC has put some great research out there. So I do want to give props to them. Did you want to say anything else, Allison?
Yeah, one other standout feature of the Humane League Lab that I think HRC hasn't been able to match just for organizational reasons, basically, is that the Humane League Lab, because they're basically only working on their own questions, has been able to commit to sharing an amount of information about their studies that is very rare, not just in animal advocacy, but in general, even in the scientific community. The fact that they make their data completely freely available without you even having to reach out to them, for instance, is extremely rare. And we've had, when we speak to scientists, they say one thing that's amazing about the animal activist community right now is how much data they're sharing, because that's just very rare overall.
Sure. Great. Thank you for adding that. And at this point, we'll go to the next question from Buck. How is your vision for ACE's future affected by GiveWell Labs, which is going to be doing more about factory farming, etc. in the future? So I think that's kind of a bit of a separate question from the next question he asked, so I'm going to go ahead and address that to start with. I think that our vision for ACE is complemented by the likes of GiveWell doing these kind of shallow investigations into farm animal advocacy causes. We think it's absolutely great that they're looking into it, and in fact we've had some discussions with them recently, and we're trying to learn from obviously their great experience and the great products that they put out there, the great research that they've done, and their great recommendations for more humanitarian causes is something that we really want to learn from. We want to minimize. We're going to be making mistakes as we grow. We're a young organization, and we're doing something that hasn't been done before. So we're going to make mistakes along the way. What we really want to do is minimize as many mistakes as possible, which is why we're trying to have conversations with organizations like GiveWell on an ongoing basis. This is something that I don't anticipate one dwarfing the other. I think that we have a positive relationship, and if anything, the fact that they're looking at this area will be a great benefit to both organizations moving forward. It's hard to tell exactly what will happen, though. Buck's second point and comment in question is that I can see ACE as moving donations from 3 particular groups: people who currently donate to ineffective animal charities like shelters, people who currently donate to non-animal causes, and people who don't donate yet. Which do you currently move money from, and how do you expect that to change in the future? I would say right now we've put more emphasis on the first of those 3 groups, trying to get people who currently donate to ineffective animal charities to move it to more effective charities. And I think that's because that's the lowest hanging fruit. Those are people who have decided animals are important to them, that they want to help animals, and it's just a matter of convincing them showing them which type of donation is going to get the greatest good for animals. With regard to people who currently donate to non-animal causes and people who don't donate yet, we certainly want to move those into the animal advocacy sphere as well, donating to effective charities. But I think that's a little bit more complex of a approach that we need to take to appeal to those people. In terms of which do we currently move money from and how do we expect that to change in the future, this is something that we really don't know yet, and it is something that we're trying to take measures to track, though. We are working with both Humane League and with Mercy for Animals, using different methods to track who is donating to them based on our recommendations, and we hope to be able to follow up with some of these people and understand why they're making that choice and where they're coming from. At that point, once we do that, then we're going to be in a better position to understand which category of those people we're being most successful with and which category of those people have the highest potential. However, this is really our first year where we're doing this. We didn't start tracking our impact like this until we made this last round of recommendations in May. So this is something that I anticipate us knowing a lot more about in the future, but that we don't necessarily know that much about right now. Allison, did you want to add anything to that?
I don't have anything else to say about that. Kind of lost your audio for a moment ago.
I'm sorry to hear that. So what I was trying to say, the take-home message of that was that we currently don't know which one of those groups we move money from. That's something where we're trying to track that information now, and we're hoping to survey and better understand donors in the future to figure out which one of those groups we're being successful with, which one of those groups we're not being successful with, and which one of those have the highest potential to cause the greatest good for animals. And at that point, we're going to target that group more heavily. But we're still in the data collection phase, so we really don't know that information yet. Great. Let's move on to the next question. Looks like we've got time for these last two questions, then we're going to have to sign off here. The next question is, ACE specifically credits MFA with its strength in attracting media coverage. Can you elaborate on that? Do you feel media magnifies the impact of an organization, and how can that be quantified? Allison, would you like to talk about that one a little bit?
Sure. We feel like a lot of what many organizations are trying to do is get information out there, persuasive information about what factory farming entails and what are the options for distancing yourself from factory farming. And of course, the media has a huge reach, and also the media is perceived as perhaps a more credible source than an animal organization, which obviously has a position on factory farming. So when MFA or any other group is able to get footage of factory farming on the news with reporters saying that these conditions are horrible, that does magnify their impact hugely, firstly in terms of the number of people they reach. We see the numbers of people that organizations report reaching and the number that they reach through media is just huge if they do have a strong media presence. And secondly, through appearing in this credible source. So it's pretty easy to quantify how many people are reached by the media impacts because the media, of course, is tracking that very closely in order to sell ads, and you can get that information. It's much harder to quantify the impact that it has on each person that it reaches, of course, because firstly, it's a relatively small contact. A news segment is not generally going to be extremely long or extremely in-depth. And secondly, if those people are widely distributed and we don't know how to find them to talk to them except through doing a whole population survey, which is difficult and expensive. So we so far do not have a really strong quantification of how individual people are impacted. One study that is out there about media impact is an economic study done by some agriculture researchers who checked on the impact of media coverage of animal farming on demand for animal products. And they found that when the media would cover something like an undercover investigation that talked about farming conditions, that resulted in a temporary and small but statistically significant drop in demand for the animal products being covered for the next 3 to 6 months, depending on the source of the story.
Great, thank you for that, Allison, and I don't have anything to add, so we'll go ahead and jump to the last question. Do you see ACE as taking a part in the debate about general strategic cause selection, i.e. which cause is best? If so, how in particular? And will you interact in this debate directly? I think there will come a time when we'll want to take a more active part in that debate. Right now, I think it's really important for a small organization with limited resources to focus their efforts, and right now we're trying to focus more of our efforts in gearing our efforts towards people that are a little bit more in line with our cause selection now in terms of advocating for animals. But I do think that as we grow, we will be in a better position to try and expand our market and include more groups of people from different causes that believe in different causes. And at that point, I could absolutely see us interacting in that debate directly. That being said, if you have any specific ideas, this question comes from Caleb, if you have any specific ideas or suggestions for a specific debate or a specific venue for us to voice our opinions on these areas, then please do contact us after this meeting, and we're always happy to talk about ways that we can increase our reach and increase our impact. Well, I think that about wraps it up. We're right at 45 minutes for the webinar now. Thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate your participation. Next time we'll make sure we get this microphone working. It's worked in the past, so I'm not sure what the problem was, but it was great that you were able to all communicate with us in the side chat window, and I think that worked out just great. So if any of you have any questions that weren't answered here today, please do contact us at jon.bockman@animalcharityevaluators.org or allison.smith@animalcharityevaluators.org, and we'll be happy to talk about it with you in more detail. So thanks a bunch, and I'll see you all at the next one. Bye.